The year 1948. Superhero comics are waning in popularity as other genres are starting to take hold. Things like science fiction, romance, westerns, crime, and horror. And we're going to see a lot of different examples of those up next as we take a look at the top books submitted to CGC for 1948 on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. Before we get started, like, comment, subscribe, check out the description for links to my Instagram, my eBay store, my email, and my whatnot. We're going to take a look at the top books submitted to CGC according to the website cgcdata.com, which aggregates the results of the CGC census. Now, we're going to focus on blue label copies, not restored, which is less of an impact here as it was in the early part of the Golden Age. And we're pretty much in the latter half of the Golden Age now. We're past World War II, and we talked about the decreasing popularity of superheroes, and we see that starting to come into the lists here, and there are just fewer comics that are being submitted. The number 10 book had 122 copies. That's post 1947. 179 copies made 10th. And it's the fewest copies to make number 10 on the list. We have to go all the way back. All the way back. I'm going through my notes. 122 copies. There, because, let's face it, books don't have the same value that they did. You have to go back to 1939 for that few number of copies to make the census. So the books at this point in time, many of them, and we're not quite at pre-code horror yet. And the other thing too about some of the books that we'll see on the list that are very popular are harder to find. So we're going to talk about that as well. So we're going to look at the top 10 based on CGC census. We're going to take a look at a lot of other keys, and we're also going to make note of the most submitted book from each publisher. And that's going to be also kind of telling. The list, honestly, it is dominated by DC Comics, but there are a lot of other publishers out there in the Golden Age, some that are still familiar to audiences today, and it is kind of interesting how that works out. So we're going to start the list, and we're going to go, let's see, number 10 on the list is not a DC comic. It is Planet Comics number 56 from Fiction House. This is a cover by Joe Doolin, a science fiction cover. Obviously, the woman in the bathing suit, the Lost World, Mista of the Moon, and Star Pirate. Fiction House was popular at the time and remains a popular collectible. This does have Matt Baker art on the interior, which increases its collectability in today's market. Matt Baker, we talked about over the last several issues. There are really three main artists of this period of the Golden Age who are very collectible. That's Matt Baker, L.B. Cole, and Alex Schomburg. Those are the three guys where them creating the cover of a book will automatically increase the demand and increase the price. We don't really talk about price in these videos. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm just interested in the books that are submitted. There is a correlation because there is a price point, right? If the book isn't really worth that much, if it's a $30 book in a fine condition, people aren't going to submit it. It's got to be worth some money. And so those are factors that are going to drive people to submit it. Obviously, if it's in very high grade, almost any book from 1948 in very high grade, but that's not really going to drive the census unless there was some sort of crazy file copy find, warehouse find, that kind of thing. So Planet Comics number 56 comes in at number 10, 122 copies of this on the CGC census. Again, those are blue labels. Number 9 on the list, and this is an incredibly popular cover. by one of those artists. This is Startling Comics number 49 from Better Publications, an airbrushed cover by Alex Schomburg. We talked about, this is, all indications are that this robot on the cover was the inspiration for Bender from Futurama. I talked about in the last couple of videos how Schomburg's style changed. He did a lot more of these airbrushed covers than he was doing during World War II, and his covers were also more minimalist. We can see here, 3 characters. That's usually what you get at this point in time. If you go back to World War II and his timely covers, those were very busy covers, whether it was timely, need, or whatever. Again, this is from Better Publications. This is a very sought-after book, a very expensive book, and there are 134 blue labels on the Census. Let's go to number 8. We still haven't hit DC yet. Adele comic, 4-color, $1.99, starring Donald Duck. Carl Barks, the very popular Duck artist, not only did the story, The Sheriff of Bullet Valley, but he also drew the cover, which is a plus for collectors. I've said it a few times. If you're not familiar with Carl Barks' work, do a little research on it. Try to find yourself a reprint. He is a definitive Duck artist, created Scrooge McDuck, and basically a lot of these comics of Donald Duck at this point in time when he was doing them, he changed the way those books were written. Previously, you would see just kind of short, 6-8 page humor strips. He created full-length adventure strips, obviously with comedy in them, dealing with Donald and his nephews, but full-blown stories that were compelling to audiences and still are. They're very popular collectibles, and not only in 4-color, but also Walt Disney's Comics and Stories and Donald Duck. The Carl Barks stuff is very sought after by collectors, and this particular book has 147 copies in the Census. At number 6, we finally get to DC. We get to Batman, and again, we talk about Batman, how at this point in time you get a lot of campy covers. This is a Christmas cover with both Batman and Robin being depicted as Jack in the Boxes. This is a Win Mortimer cover. This is issue number 45. And Batman is probably the most collected and easiest to, well, I wouldn't say easiest to find. I think there are other books that are easiest to find, but the combination of the desirability for the Batman title specifically, a lot of folks collect that title, and the desirability for those books is very high. So even as you get to lower grades, you're going to have more of a likelihood of those books being submitted to CGC. For this issue, 156 copies in the Census. At number 6 on the list is Batman number 46. This is more of an adventure cover, which is also drawn by Win Mortimer, where Robin and Batman are battling mutiny in the big house. An interesting black cover with the spotlight. There are 159 copies on the Census. We're staying with Batman, and this is a really desired cover, the Batcave schematics cover that was drawn also by Win Mortimer. Kind of solidifying where the Batcave is. You see the giant penny, the playing card, and the dinosaur all in the trophy room already. Those remain constants in the Batman mythos to this day. So this is, I think from this era, late 40s, let's say, this is one of the more desired covers. And there are 183 copies on the Census. And we're going to stay with Batman, but not the Batman title. This is a very popular book and made news a couple of years ago. This is Detective Comics number 140. It's the first appearance of the Riddler. And this particular copy here is from the Promise collection, which sold for a lot of money. I don't remember off the top of my head. It was $400,000, I think, a 9.6 white pager. If you're interested in the Promise collection, there are plenty of videos out there. Automatic Comics delved into that quite a bit. It was basically 2 brothers. One was drafted into the war in Korea. The other followed him. The brother who was drafted made his brother promise that he would take care of his funny books. Sadly, the brother who was the comic book collector passed away. The other brother that kept his promise to keep the collection kept it obviously in very nice condition for many years. He passed away just a few years ago. The family brought this to market, and it was one of the huge pedigrees. And also, it came out during the comic boom. It came out as a pedigree and came to market. But this is a desirable cover with the Riddler. Not a lot of Golden Age appearances. Really gained popularity in the Silver Age, and I think his popularity was really driven forward by his use in the Batman TV series. The Frank Gorshin portrayal, that was the first 2 episodes, were Riddler episodes, a Riddler two-parter. And for those episodes, Frank Gorshin was actually nominated for an Emmy Award for Best Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series. He did lose to Don Knotts for The Andy Griffith Show. This is a book. Also, of all the books in the top 10, this has the lowest mean grade of the books on the census, 4.27. We usually don't see Detective Comics crack into the top 10. It's usually just the Batman title. And I think the fact that this is such a huge key and it's going to be graded well into lower grades, you probably even a 1 and a 0.5 makes sense to get graded in many cases. It's going to increase the number of copies on the census. And for this book, there are 200 copies on the census. We're going to stay with Batman and his Rogues Gallery for number 3 on the list. This is Batman number 49. And the cover is supposedly by Bob Kane. But again, I've said before, probably took credit for it when it wasn't his work. Anyway, it is a classic cover with the Joker coming out of the genie's bottle. It is Batman number 49. This Joker in the Batman's Arabian Nights story. It is a little bit bigger, and there are collectors that really seek out the Joker covers more than anything else, any other type of cover in Batman. And Joker made so many frequent appearances up until the late 60s in the Batman titles. There are a lot of them to collect. And some are more fun than those. I think this is one that collectors really enjoy collecting. Let's go to number 2 on the list. Still Batman. This is Batman number 47, which is the full origin of Batman. Bob Kane and Charles Paris cover. And a classic story, which delves into the origin of Batman and, the murder of his parents and how he trained, etc., etc. So this is a classic story. I remember it being reprinted in the 1970s and I think one of the super spectaculars. So a classic story. This particular book, 294 copies on the census. And this is the most restored copies of any book from 1948, and there are 46 restored copies, which is usually at this point in time, we've been seeing about 10% of the blue labels in purple label, but this one has a few more. Now let's jump to number 1 on the list. And surprisingly, it's not Batman. We kind of go back in time, but it is an anniversary issue. And it's 1948. So in 1948, we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of Superman in Superman issue number 53. And that is kind of what I think drives the collectability of this particular book. And also, it's the origin of Superman, a classic cover. The cover here is by Wayne Boring and Stan Kay, 10th anniversary issue. This is, if you're going to get any of the Superman books, Golden Age Superman, later Golden Age Superman books, I would say, on the Superman title, this is the one to get of any of the books under 100, I would think. Just classic cover of the rocket ship being launched from exploding Krypton, Superman in the foreground, and the origin retold. So in 1948, they're retelling both the origin of Superman and Batman, I guess trying to gain traction with younger audiences for these characters that have been around 9 or 10 years. So this is the most submitted book to CGC from 1948. And I have to imagine the number of copies for issues of Superman and Batman are about the same at this point in time. There might even be a few more Supermans around. And this is actually, I think this is the most submitted book to date. I'm pretty sure it is the most. I'm looking at my notes for each previous year. Sorry about the rustling of pages. Yes. This is the most submitted book up to date, 319 blue labels on the census. Now let's take a look at some other key issues outside the top 10 and some tops from different publishers. Another Dell book, but it's an issue number 1, not his first appearance, but this is 11th on the census. It's Lone Ranger number 1 from Dell. Not a huge key, other than it being a number 1, but I was saying at the intro of this video how Westerns were getting more popular. We're going to see that more and more Western titles being pushed. Westerns were big in the 40s because I think part of that was driven by the early days of television. Television was becoming somewhat commonplace in people's homes, and for entertainment for kids, Westerns were popular because what they did was they took the old movie serials, which were fairly short, usually under an hour, and they made TV programs. They brought them to TV. Not even the serials, just the feature films of the Westerns from, like Republic Pictures and whatnot. And then they started producing some of their own material. The Lone Ranger, I think it was 1951, he got his own TV series, and was immensely popular in the early 1950s. This particular book has 118 copies on the census. Now let's go to another classic book. We talked about the Promise collection with the Riddler book a little bit earlier. The book that tied the record for the highest sale from the Promise collection with the Riddler book is this book, Phantom Lady number 17, the top book from Fox Features Syndicate, with this classic Headlights cover by Matt Baker. Phantom Lady run is very sought after by collectors, specifically the Baker issues. And this is the most desired at all. This is a very expensive book. That high-grade Promise collection book sold like the Riddler. I think it was $437,000, if my memory serves me right. So, you got a little Bondage, a little Headlights, and Matt Baker. So we've seen 2 Bakers and a Schomburg so far on the list, and we will see more from each of those as the list progresses. And this particular book does have 110 copies on the census, a mean grade of 4.77. So again, this is going to be graded in lower grades. Collectors would be interested in an entry-level copy down in the 1.0 range. So let's go to the next book on our list, and this is Planet Comics. Another Planet Comics. Planet Comics number 53. This is 14th on the list. It's a Joe Doolin cover, a Bondage cover, and it was also used in Seduction of the Innocent. We're going to see more and more books like this over the next, I guess, about 5 or 6 years. Books that are labeled Sodi books. There are collectors that try to put together all the books that were mentioned in William Wortham's Seduction of the Innocent, which led to the Comics Code Authority, and so on and so forth. A popular book. And again, I'm talking about how Fiction House is pretty popular at this time. It's available enough, and there are collectors that want these runs of Planet and Wings and Jumbo and Jungle, etc. And I do come across them from time to time. Up next on the list, I actually have a raw copy up there. It is Tarzan number 1. Let's take a look at a nicer copy. This is the first of the ongoing Tarzan series. Most of these Tarzan books, as you get later in the run, aren't really worth much. The numbering of this actually continued when DC acquired the rights to Tarzan in 1972, but this is the first issue, and not unlike Dell Comics, there's no issue number on the cover, but this is Tarzan issue number 1, and there are Tarzan and the White Savages of Vari. They're not depicted very nicely. Then again, Tarzan honestly isn't either. But the first of the ongoing series, 99 copies on the census. Up next is the another Alex Schomburg cover. This is Brick Bradford, number 6, from Standard Comics. A similar robot to Bender, another robot cover. Again, Schomburg's more minimalist approach at this point in time. Just 3 characters on the cover. Usually you'll see an antagonist, a hero, and a female in distress. That is kind of how he was producing his covers at the time. So this is our second Schomburg on the list. Again, you're going to see with these popular cover artists, they did work for these smaller publishers, lesser known titles. I don't know offhand how many issues there were in the Brick Bradford run or how many people collect it. But people collect Schomburg covers, enough so that there are 85 copies on the Census. Let's go to another book, and this is actually fairly high for this publisher. This is the top Gilberton book on the list, and it's Gilberton. It's going to be Classics Illustrated, issue number 53 here, which is the version of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and it's a Henry Kiefer cover. This is the only edition. It says original and only edition. Usually with Classics Illustrated, you get an HRA number because they kept republishing it over and over again. And you'd have to look at the back cover to see what the most recent issue number they were advertising was. But this being a singleton is probably why it jumps up on the list a little bit. People also collect Christmas-themed books, so that pushes it up. The mean grade is fairly high at 7.47, and there are 75 copies on the Census. Let's go to 36th on the list, and this is the top book from 4-Star. This is Brenda Starr, number 14, with a Jack Kamen bondage cover. I think that's what makes this particular issue of Brenda Starr so popular. I'm not sure if that's Brenda Starr because I thought Brenda Starr was redheaded, but maybe I'm wrong. This has an average grade on the Census of just 4.92, and I think at this point in time it is significant if the mean grade is less than 4. That means people are submitting lower grade copies, which means the book should have value. We talked about the Brenda Starr movie the last time. I haven't watched it yet, and I am afraid to. There are 70 copies on the Census. Let's go to another Fox book, but this is a classic cover by Jack Kamen. This is Blue Beetle, number 54. With this Good Girl cover. Blue Beetle is reduced to just a little circle in the lower left-hand corner, but this woman with the guy coming in with the knife, and for some reason her reflection doesn't match her back. We can see here her back to us. Doesn't appear she has a bra, but she has a bra on in the mirror. A classic Good Girl cover. It was used in Seduction of the Innocent, and there's also internally a hanging panel, which is something that it gets the note from CGC. This is also a desired, expensive book later in the Blue Beetle run when it kind of, again, we're talking about how superheroes are winding down. Blue Beetle was a superhero. People weren't interested in that anymore. He still is the titular character, but he is not prominently featured on the cover. There are 68 copies on the Census. Up next, the top book from Timely Comics, Captain America Comics 65. Captain America would just last one more year in this original run that started in 1941. This is a Sid Shores cover, and a very busy cover. I don't think this has any other key significance, but boy, there's a lot of verbiage on the cover. We can see that, Timely's struggling with their superheroes at this point. DC was still doing okay, and obviously their superheroes would survive through to the Silver Age consecutively. Timely's would not. And so the top Timely comic comes in at 42nd place with 66 copies on the Census. Tops from Nidor Publications is Fighting Yank number 23, an Alex Schomburg cover. Here, there are a few more antagonists. There are 4, or if you count the hand in the bottom left-hand corner, 5. And if you count the Cobra, 6. Antagonists, but the Fighting Yank is coming to the rescue of the damsel in distress. Listed by CGC as a classic cover, and indeed it is. We talk about Schomburg. And he did a lot of work for Nidor / Pine / Standard, all kind of the same company. Same umbrella, I think it was. But Fighting Yank number 23, 65 copies on the Census, which is tied with the top book from American Comics Group, which is Adventures into the Unknown number 1. It's the first ongoing horror comic. And this has a Edvard Moritz cover. ACG lasted into the 1960s, Adventures of the Unknown, after the Comics Code took on more of a sci-fi theme. But this also, like the Fighting Yank, has 65 copies in the census. We'll drop it just one more to a DC key, and that is Flash Comics number 92 with this Carmine Infantino cover. This is the first cover appearance of the Black Canary, and this is really what people think of when they think of the Golden Age Black Canary. She had replaced Johnny Thunder in his feature in Flash Comics that started with issue number 1, and then she also took his place as a member of the Justice Society of America, would stay with the JSA until the end of their Golden Age run in All-Star Comics number 57, and would be brought back when DC brought the JSA back for Earth 2 team-ups in the 1960s, and Black Canary is still relevant today. I just picked up issue number 1 of a new Black Canary series. So, again, this is kind of a classic cover and the first cover appearance of Black Canary and her first solo story. Johnny Thunder was gone, and Black Canary took over the feature, and there are 64 copies on the census. Up next is a magazine, really. Parents Magazine Institute. This is Negro Heroes number 2. This is really bolstered by the cover feature of Jackie Robinson. So, Jackie Robinson, Rookie of the Year. This would have been summer 1948, so it would have come out with the new baseball season. Jackie Robinson becoming the first black player in the traditional major leagues. The Negro Leagues are now recognized as major leagues, but either in the American or National League with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. Had a superlative year. He was the Rookie of the Year. And really kind of underrated, and I'm a huge baseball fan, is Jackie Robinson's talent. He only played 10 years in the big leagues. Less so because of the color barrier, but also because he served in World War II. So he wasn't even playing pro ball during that time. A phenomenal athlete, also played basketball, football, and track and field at UCLA, and was an NCAA champion in the long jump. And that was not a... that was kind of a family affair because his brother, Mac Robinson, was a silver medalist in the Olympics, taking a silver medal in the 200 meters in 1936 Olympics behind Jesse Owens. But anyway, I'm pretty sure the Jackie Robinson cover does bolster the desirability of this book, and it is the top from Parents Magazine Institute. Let's go to the top from Fawcett Comics, and this is Captain Marvel Adventures number 80. It's still claiming the largest circulation of any comic magazine. This is a C.C. Beck cover, and it's a retelling of the origin of Captain Marvel. Just like Superman and Batman, saying, hey, we have these characters. Remember where they came from. I really like this cover with him kind of being proclaimed a hero by the wizard Shazam and the Shadow there. Captain Marvel in a Twice Told Tale, this story of how Billy Batson first became Captain Marvel. I don't know if there's a reprint or just they kind of imagined the story. They had done it previously and telling it from Savannah's point of view, but that was I think it was comic in Shazam number 8 reprinted the 100-page super spectacular. Anyway, again, a classic story. There are a lot of these out there, but they're only going to be graded in higher grade. You're not going to get this book. It's not worth getting graded down in the good range. So there are 57 copies on the census. Westerns coming to the fore, and Timely / Atlas is getting into the mix. There's no indication of... It says Atlas on the... this is Two Gun Kid number 1, by the way, a Sid Shores cover. This book lasted for quite a while. And I'm trying to remember because some of the Westerns were canceled and then brought back by Marvel in around 1972 when they just started publishing everything they could to kind of consume space on the newsstands. This is the first appearance of the Two Gun Kid, and again, a character that would survive into the Silver Age. As Westerns were becoming more popular, there are 56 copies on the census. Up next is, where are we? The most from Magazine Village. This is True Crime Comics number 3. It is a Jack Cole cover. Jack Cole, the creator of Plastic Man, and also a sought-after Golden Age artist. Classic cover, drug story, and the emergence of crime as a very popular genre in comic books. This particular book has 54 copies on the census, which ties it with the top book from Quality Comics, and that is Black Hawk number 20 with a Reed Crandall cover. Reed Crandall, one of my favorite, just I think a great artist, one of my favorites from the Golden Age. Yeah, Quality Comics got absorbed, bought off by DC in, I think it was 1956, and Black Hawk title remained being published into the 1970s, was rebooted in the 1980s, is still around. So again, this bondage cover makes this particular issue of Black Hawk the most popular for collectors. Let's stay with crime, and we'll go back to crime. We'll go to St. John's Publications' top book from 1948, and that is Crime Reporter number 2, cover by Matt Baker. So I think Baker and Schomburg are 3 apiece. I'm not officially keeping track. You can at home. Again, popularity of Matt Baker and the woman kind of in the lingerie, I guess running out of her dressing room away from this guy trying to shoot her. The matinee murders, death stages a grisly drama. Matt Baker, woman in lingerie. What more can you ask for? It's used in Sodi, and it says lingerie cover as well. There are 49 copies on the Census. The top from Superior Comics. A Jack Kamen cover, used in Sodi, Brenda Starr, Volume 2, number 4. And there were 2 Brenda Stars coming out at the time. I'm not sure which one came first, because one was published by 4-Star and one here by Superior. This is September. The 4-Star one came out in March. So this is later in the year, but it's... I don't know. I'm not sure of the Brenda Starr run, but the Jack Kamen cover, and I think this woman kind of being about to be operated on, that probably looks like Brenda Starr with the red hair, and quite a sensational cover, I will say. There are 48 copies on the Census. I'm going to go to another timely book that has a very low census count, or not a low census count, a low mean grade. And that's Captain America Comics number 69. Was it Al Bellman cover? The Weird Tales of the Wee Males. We're about to get into Captain America's Stranger books. The Captain America was Weird Tales, right? That it became very shortly, and I think we'll probably touch on that next year. Or next week when we go into 1949. The mean grade on this is just 4.13, which is very low. It is later in the run, and maybe this Lilliputian kind of cover is more popular with collectors. It is a strange one for me. Let me know what you think of this cover in the comments. I'm not sure what to make of it. There are 45 copies on the Census. Let's go to another publisher, Avon, and their top book is The Saint number 4 with a Matt Baker cover. And, of course, the woman looks very attractive. This is The Saint. He had a movie run. There were a number of movies in the 1940s. George Sanders portrayed him in several of those. Roger Moore had a TV series out of Britain in the 1960s with The Saint. And you can see in the left hand, mid book by the spine, that Saint logo, the kind of stick figure with the halo that signifies the Saint, created by Leslie Charteris. The Matt Baker cover, that's what's going to drive it. 43 copies on the Census. We're talking about now small amounts of copies on the Census, probably less than 100 of these books in existence. Let's go to another DC book, another key. This is a more minor key. This is All Flash number 32 with a Lee Elias cover. Lee Elias, we'll be talking about in the pre-code horror age. He did a lot of pre-code horror books, but he did this cover of The Flash, which is the first appearance of the Fiddler. It's also a bondage cover, and it's the last issue of All Flash. It's the first appearance of the Golden Age Star Sapphire. Last issue of All Flash. These these superhero comics are winding down. We're in that kind of over the next 8 years, the superheroes' popularity will be decreasing. The books will be disappearing until we get into the start of the Silver Age. And even that's going to take a few years to really get a lot of different titles on board. So there are just 41 copies on the Census. What's going to become popular, I'd imagine, is EC Comics, but their top book from 1948 is Moon Girl, still, issue number 5. This is a Sheldon Moldoff cover who did a lot of work for DC. It's the EC's first horror story, The Zombie Terror. This is more of a sci-fi book, Moon Girl. You can see like her flying and the 3 women in the, kind of spaceship over the city. Again, the top book from EC, 40 copies on the Census. The top book from DS Publishing is Gangsters Can't Win #2 with a skull cover. People like them some skull covers. That's going to be popular. Talked about the popularity of the crime books at this point in time. There are 39 copies of this in the Census. That ties it with the next book we're going to look at, which is the top book from Archie Publications, which is Archie #32, an Alpha-Gali cover. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not. And just this kind of cute little Veronica cover with Jughead being his ace self and drinking all of the ice cream sodas. So Archie, still collectible. These 10-cent Archies, especially the Archie title itself, are very sought after by collectors if you can get it in high grade. Let's go to the first appearance, and this is a timely book from 1948. This is Venus number one, the most beautiful girl in the world. Venus did have some appearances here in the late Golden Age into the 1950s, resurfaced in a Submariner comic in the early 70s, and has been around as one of the Agents of Atlas recently from Marvel Comics. So it is a character that's still being used. And this is kind of, we're starting to see this timely / Atlas branch into new titles. At this point in time, we see the Western titles and, trying to figure out, find their footing in the market. But this is the first appearance of Venus. Let's go to the top book from SNK, which is Law Against Crime #1 with a L.B. Cole cover. Showing an electrocution on the cover, sort of like ripped from the headlines. Real stories from police files. This is our first L.B. Cole cover of the year. And these L.B. Cole was doing work for really these tiny publishers. So I think that makes it even more desirable because it's hard to find L.B. Cole covers. And he did like just a lot of different type of work. So this particular book, 38 copies on the Census. Lev Gleason Publications, a popular, they've been around for a while. They also published Boy Comics and Daredevil. Their top book of the year was a new title, Crime and Punishment #1, as they're getting into the true crime genre. This is a Charles Biro cover, and there are 35 copies on the Census. Transworld's top book, Mysterious Traveler Comics #1 with a skull-faced railroad train. It's featured on the Mutual Broadcasting Network, so this must have been a popular radio show at the time. This cover is by Bob Powell. Bob Powell did a lot of his work for Fiction House, with most of his work with Sheena. Did do some work for Marvel in the 60s, the later stages of his career and of his life. This is has an adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart, and it's based on a Mutual radio series. But the skull cover is what makes this desirable for collectors. 32 copies on the Census. We're talking about, again, a small number of copies on the Census for these books. How about KK Publications? March of Comics issue. What issue number is this? Issue number 20. It's a Walt Kelly cover, and it does have a Carl Barks interior. It is a Donald Duck story. So the Darkest Africa story. It seems as though they reprinted something from a Dell comic in this. I don't have a lot of familiar with March of Comics or KK Publications, but there are 30 copies on the Census. Another timely #1 is Kid Colt Outlaw #1. It says Kid Colt Outlaw Marvel Comics. It's really, I think it's still timely at this point in time. I don't think it's Atlas yet. And you can see it says, at least on the trade dress, that it's Kid Colt, Hero of the West, not Outlaw. Kid Colt, again, lasted into the 1970s and beyond for timely Atlas Marvel. But an issue #1, there have to be Western collectors out there, but there are just 28 copies on the Census. We're getting really hard to find books at this point in time, at least in nicer condition. Up next, the top book from Harvey Publications, and this is Black Cat #14. This is when the series was still focused on the titular female hero, the Black Cat. The later issues would delve much more into full pre-code horror. And those are collectible. Black Cat is still fairly popular with collectors. There are 27 copies on the census. Up next, top book from Prize Publications. And this is an interesting one. This is Charlie Chan #1 that has a cover by Jack Kirby and Joe Simon, and also includes Carmine Infantino art. This is also based on the Charlie Chan radio show. Charlie Chan was, I'm trying to think where he got his start. Was it in pulps? He had a radio series. He had movies starring Warner Oland in the 1930s. In the 1970s, he had an animated series, Charlie Chan and the Chan Clan. So this is a character that was very well known at the time. Earl Durr Bigger's world famous detective. And again, Simon and Kirby covers what's going to drive this one, but there are only 26 copies on the census. Up next, from Magazine Enterprises. Did we have a Magazine Enterprises yet? I think not. I think this is top for Magazine Enterprises. This is Manhunt #6. This is an Ogden Whitney cover. Also has interior art by L.B. Cole and also Fred Gardenier, who is best known as the creator of Zatara. Two-page story written by Gardner Fox, and the bondage cover. The woman being pulled out, gagged, and tied up in the morgue with this mysterious guy in the knife, with the knife in the yellow jacket when he wasn't taking care of Curious George. I guess he was terrorizing this poor woman. 25 copies on the census. That's going to tie it with the top from Street and Smith Publications, which is Red Dragon Comics #3. This has a cover by L.E. Gulick. The cover's by Bob Powell. And again, I think this skull cover is what's going to drive this popularity. 25 on the census. So we're getting to very hard to find books. Right? This one is from Pines, the top one from Pines. And this is Johnny Hazard #6. This cover is by Frank Robbins, who I think a lot of collectors will best remember as the artist for pretty much the entire run of The Invaders in the 1970s. He also did some Batman stuff in the late 60s, early 70s, if I remember correctly. So he did this cover of this Pirates story. 20 copies on the census with a mean grade of 8.11. So there must have been like a file copy find of several issues. From Ace Publications is Super Mystery Comics Volume 7, #4. This is, again, a woman in distress with the man with the knife. The prevalence of crime comics at this time, just 19 copies on the census. Also with the same number is from Hillman Periodicals, and this supplants Airboy as the top book from this publisher. This is Western Fighters #1, which is also a cover by Jack Kirby and Joe Simon. It does have hanging panels in the interior. That kind of more is, I'm going to imagine, just like the old Western motif rather than like the horror motif. So again, a Simon and Kirby cover of a brand new #1, but 19 copies on the census. And there have to be Jack Kirby collectors that are after these books, the Charlie Chan and the Western Fighters. Those are pretty cool. The top book from David McKay Publication is here, feature book #53 with the Phantom. Feature book was, so David McKay, and I've said this in previous videos, he did a lot of reprints of a number of newspaper strips, and he did have these feature books, and each feature book was a different character. I just had a Flash Gordon one, I had a Dagwood one. The early ones were magazine sized. These are comic book sized. And this included the Phantom. This one is 17 copies on the census. And I also included another SNK, which has just 17 copies on the census. This is Law Against Crime #3, which has an L.B. Cole cover and also is used in Sodi. We did have, was Law Against Crime a different one, right? Yeah, #1 that we had just a little bit earlier on the list. But again, a Jack Cole cover that is going to, but again, just 17 copies on the census. From Novelty Comics, Novelty Press, is Target Comics Volume 9, #6, L.B. Cole cover. And there are just 14 copies of this on the Census. This has a little bit more of the L.B. Cole vibes with the very striking use of primary colors. And we can see a lot of these smaller publishers, L.B. Cole and Alex Schomburg and Matt Baker, we're doing a lot of their work for them. These are hard to find. I mean, there are only 14 copies of this book on the Census. And the final book on the list is going to be the #1 book from Eastern Color. And this is a Stephen Douglas cover of Famous Funnies number 169. I don't know if we will see Famous Funnies just jump up on the list quite a bit in a few years, because they're going to change the style of stories that they were focusing on here. Again, just comedy stuff, which isn't highly sought after by collectors, especially considering that it involves characters that are no longer part of the public consciousness. In this issue, Bobby Socks. I mean, at least like, somebody like Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, etc. People still know who they are. Less so here. So that's going to conclude my video of the Census, CGC Census count from 1948. And we've been doing this for, I guess now 15 or 16 episodes. We still have a long way to go. We're in 2025, so it's going to take us, we have 1948 means that we are now 77 years to go. On the list, it'll be 78 years because by the time we get there, we'll have finished with 2025, and we'll be in 2026, and we'll be able to do a list of top books from 2025. So I always have a great time, going through these and learning more about the history of comics and kind of comparing where books stand in terms of their collectability, their availability, and how trends change. So I hope you've enjoyed coming along for these rides. I know these videos have gotten a little bit longer as we're including all these different publishers, but I think it's people who are watching and are enjoying it. Please share it. Please give me a thumbs up. I appreciate it. You can take a look at a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.